This is County Talk. I'm Eric Schmidt. Thanks for tuning in. On this edition of County Talk, we're going to get a bit of a history lesson, a lot of current events, and perspective on what it's like to be in the public eye in Washington County for more than 40 years. Joining us is Washington County Commissioner Roy Rogers, first elected to the Board of Commissioners in 1984 after serving as mayor of Tualatin, Oregon. Commissioner Rogers, thank you for joining us on this edition of County Talk. We really appreciate your being here.
Thank you, Eric.
You are the longest serving Oregon County Commissioner currently, and in fact, you are the longest serving county commissioner in Oregon history. You were first elected, as I said, to the Board of Commissioners in 1984. Would it be fair to say that you've seen a lot of changes in Washington County since you took office back in 1985?
That would be an understatement. Substantial changes, not only in the population, but in the sort of things that we're doing in terms of industry, our road systems, the issues of dealing with a variety of issues that it went over in 85 and 85 that we were experiencing that we're not experiencing today. So very different. Big ag community in those days, very different today.
Before we get into some of those issues, has the government structure of Washington County changed substantially since 1985?
Totally changed. When I was first elected, and up until about 3 years ago, we were a government of folks who came in with various occupations and backgrounds. A lot of us were in business, and we came in with the idea that we were going to run it much like a business. We were there not because we were experts. We were good at getting elected, I guess, but we weren't experts on the particular issues of the county. We were there to guide, give our input, and then hire very competent people, which we always did, and get out of their way. And they conducted the activities. Today, it's much more operational, and our board, which has recently gone full-time, they're involved in all the activities, and so they're really involved in the daily activities versus what we used to do. So it's quite different.
From your perspective, is it good or bad?
Well, that's a great question. If you ask the other four, they probably would say it's really great because of the size and change. I was somewhere in the mid 250,000 range when I got there. Now we're over 600,000. But I didn't like the change, and that was no secret. I was the one dissenter. And the reason I didn't is I didn't want to be a full-time paid professional politician. I'm happy to look at it as a service. I wanted to go there and do things that I thought were important to do, and guide actions through, coming up with hopefully innovative ideas and concepts, but let the real professionals, who really are the professionals, do the job. And today, because of the complexity of the activities, and I've been there long enough that I understand them, just simply because, not that I'm so smart compared to everybody else, but when you are involved in all of those over many, many years, you learn how things operate and how things are done. But the professionals that we hire are top notch. They understand the activities. And I've always subscribed to the idea that you get out of their way, let them do it, and you monitor, you set objectives, you have metrics on which to manage, and that's how you manage. Today it's much more of again, operational, where you're a team player, and that's not exactly what I had envisioned.
Understood. For a long time, you were the go-to commissioner, not only in Washington County, but in the metro area when it came to roads, bridges, culverts, all things transportation and traffic-oriented. Where are we today in terms of a viable, efficient transportation infrastructure in Washington County? Are we getting there, or are we stalled someplace?
I don't think we're stalled. We've always had great ideas. We have a lack of transit. We know that. So there's transit deficient areas. We're making great progress compared to a lot of other counties, and that we adopted early. In fact, it was right after I was in office. We used to have a great amount of laughter. It wasn't really funny, but we talked about name the pothole. We were a farm to market system, and so now what we did then is we asked the public to give us some additional funds. We call it MSTIP, those funds are of a great benefit to us. We also have always been very collaborative with our state, federal, and regional partners, and so our system is very different compared to others, and that we actually put dollars into that. So where are we at? Congested, but you can't go from 250 to say 650 and not have struggles. Um, People are, I think, stressed with the amount of new traffic that they encounter, but that's going to happen. We're not idly sitting by and not addressing it. It's important for us to look at all the alternatives and to continue to look at the issues. We still have a farm to market system in many areas. In the metropolitan areas, there's a great demand for sidewalks. There's great demand for what we call active transportation. We're doing that. We don't build a road that we don't have sidewalks and bike paths. So it might be your listeners might be interested to know that between 25 and 30% of every road project goes to those amenities, and so it's not that we're devoid of them. So I think, Eric, in regard to your question, progress is being made. Is it enough? Of course not. Will we ever get there? I don't know. With the new infrastructure bill that was passed by Congress, it's going to give us a lot more funds, and I hope that we're going to see more of those come to this particular county.
Do you think the state of Oregon is serious about helping the metro area solve its problems?
Well, I think so. I still serve on as a Region 1 ODOT chair, which is 4 counties. It's the most populous of all of the ODOT regions. And we're very serious about it. It's just a matter of funding. I mean, I always say, and used to say when we had our county strategic plan, which needs to be updated, but when we adopted that way back when, that it's like you have dinner plans, maybe Thanksgiving, which is coming up, and you invite your guests, and then all of a sudden they all invite guests, and those guests invite guests, and their guests invite guests, and you say, well, I didn't anticipate that, and I certainly don't have the amount of food necessary to accommodate everybody. That's the way the capacity on roads are. Everybody's coming. 50%, by the way, I don't know if you knew this, but 50% of the folks who are working in Washington County on any given day are not in this county. They don't live here. And so we have a lot of migration in on a daily basis. Well, that takes facilities. It takes ways of moving people. And as things get more congested, it's going to be more important to take a look at our friends at TriMet and say, how do we creatively come up with solutions?
I did not know that, 50%. That's quite the figure. I recently talked to Beaverton Mayor Lacey Beatty about public transportation. She's calling for more public transportation. You are, in a way, today, too. How do we convince TriMet to get us more buses and light rail systems and that kind of stuff?
Well, I would say about TriMet, they have exactly the same issue that the counties and cities have, lack of funding. It's not that they don't want to do things, they don't have the funding to do it. And so consequently, they're very much a player in saying, how do we support regional transportation systems in terms of roads? Their buses run on roads, but they like rail as well. We had a Southwest Corridor project that was being proposed that didn't get funded, but we have deficient areas as far as transportation facilities for rail. But I think anybody would be really inaccurate if they didn't say TriMet was there to solve the problems. TriMet very much wants to solve the problems. They just need a lot of funds to do it.
You're a big picture kind of guy when it comes to transportation. What kind of public transportation would you see as most viable for Washington County? Is it more trains? Is it buses? What do we need to have?
The answer to your question is all of the above. Somehow we have to take a look at what is the spine of the system, which is the mass transit. And so mass transit in terms of rail would be something that would come to the south. That proposal was not voted in, only went to Tigard. They talked about Tualatin, but it was a very outskirts. So you're going to have to get into Tualatin and into Wilsonville. So we need good rail. We need buses because they're nimble and they get into the various communities. And then we need with the pandemic and people learning that they can work from home, we need those facilities such as sidewalks and bike paths that we can recreate on. So it's not one size fits all. It's like saying you and I are talking right now via the internet, and we're finding that people don't need the facilities like they did. My projection, I'll give you lots of projections if you want, because probably 10 or 15 years out, I won't be in office and hopefully still around this earth. But I think that you're going to see downtown core areas die out in terms of what you see in numbers of people who are going there, the amount of office space. You don't want to own a big building in downtown Portland, for instance, or even in downtown anywhere. Your malls are starting not to have the type of foot traffic they did because people are finding that they can shop online. So people are working at home, those who can, which is a lot of the commuting traffic that went from the suburbs to downtown Portland. And you're finding people are shopping online. So what does that mean? That those spine connections, everything going to downtown Portland, I think we're going to have to reevaluate that and say, we're going to do like you do in Asia and other countries where you have what they call ring roads. We're going to need ring transportation systems. So somebody who wants to ride a fast-moving train, for instance, between Tualatin and Hillsborough, we're going to have to figure a way to get that. They're very expensive, and most people say, well, gee, that's a lot of money for a trail, a light rail. That's only part of the picture. What happens on these, as you might know, and your viewers probably know, is they become a Christmas list for every other project that they go by. So, for instance, when we were doing this last one that went from Portland to really Bridgeport Village, you were doing viaducts, on Barber Boulevard that are 100 years old. Well, those are very expensive. You were doing tram and some kind of escalator systems to get up to, OHSU. You're looking at intersections that they were crossing that they said, well, now's our chance to get that intersection improved. You're looking at all kinds of what they call ITS, Intelligent Transportation System improvement. So everybody, as it goes by, tax on some improvement, and that's why it gets to be so expensive. It's going to take a while. Who knows? Maybe
I knew I'd get a good answer out of you on that.
Oh, I don't know. Thank you.
You're the man when it comes to transportation. Let's talk about housing for just a minute or two, if we could. Washington County is in the housing business for all intent and purpose, thanks in large part to the voter approval of the Metro Housing Bond several years back. Are we moving fast enough to find adequate safe shelter for those in need? And are we moving fast enough to find permanent housing for low-income and senior citizens?
Those are two great questions. You put them into one, but there's a huge housing need, and one has to go back at the systemically and look at some of the reasons for that. And as Oregonians, and I support this, we have a tight urban growth boundary, and this will get to your questions. And you say, well, what's that got to do with housing? Well, anybody understands that the United States is based upon a free enterprise set of principles, and that's how we operate. And so when you have limited supplies of land, you're going to have limited supplies of availability to build the kind of facilities you need. And so what happens is when you have very small amounts of buildable land, it gets higher and higher in price. I can remember probably about the time that I first got elected, you could buy some pretty good Mountain View land, and if it was $10,000 an acre, you thought you were getting really ripped off. That was a high price. Now you can't buy that kind of property for less than $1 million an acre, and that $1 million means and then you have to put the infrastructure in. So they said, well, what's all this got to do with housing? Well, as the population continues to increase and people move here, they're looking for housing. So those who have any amount of means and good jobs, and in our Silicon Valley that we have here, they're going to bid up the prices. So when they bid up the prices, that means there's less affordable housing, and it's a trickle down. The more that you trickle down, then you find people who are homeless and without activities or places to live. So you have to sit there and say, well, what does government do about this? Well, the answer is that we're going to put up affordable housing. Remember, affordable housing really isn't that affordable. It's only affordable to the occupants because we subsidize it. But as far as the cost to put those units up, it's not affordable. The only way it's even possible is the huge tax credits. And so there are people who are getting huge tax credits to put these facilities up. And so they're paying a little or no taxes, which makes people mad and say, well, gee, how about those rich guys? They're not paying the taxes. And you say, well, this is one of the ways that they don't pay taxes, is they invest in these kinds of facilities. Does that mean that they're bad? Of course not. We need them. And more directly to your question, it depends whether or not we'll ever catch up on the amount of population that continues to move here. You know, if we said that everybody who moves here has a job and is going to do well, that's one thing. But that's not the case. We're having vast numbers of people who are moving here who don't have jobs and do not have adequate support systems. And so all along the West Coast, unlike other parts of the country, we're finding that people are moving in with little or no resources, and they're asking their local governments to assist them. That gets to be problematic when it's in geographic areas like we're in the metropolitan area here, in that we're taking a lot more of our share of that population than maybe other areas. So you talk to other commissions in other parts of the state, they see some homeless, but that means that they see one or two people wandering around. Well, we can find that in about every, third of a block. And so we have a much different issue. So it's an issue that we're going to have to face. And I would say, and I didn't get to see your questions ahead of time, as you know, I told you that. We need to determine, at least in Washington County, what kind of government we are, and what's our mission? What are we going to do? And if it's everything, I would submit to you, and others would disagree, and that's fine. But you can't be good at everything. You got to pick a few things and be very good at them. And one of our charges is probably Health and Human Services, and then it would be housing, as you talk about. And there are other things that we need to take and look with our city partners at and say, should we continue to do those things? And if we should, how do we price those? Or should we maybe look at partnering with them to perform them? And I can get into that if you want, but that's off of your housing, but you have to do that at the beginning.
Let me ask you this. A lot of the people who are in need of affordable housing have behavioral health issues, mental health, substance abuse, that kind of thing. Where are we in combining the need for housing and treatment in Washington County? And is that something you expected when you were elected back in 1985, to have to deal with human beings?
Well, I knew I was going to deal with human beings. I saw those on a regular basis, and they talked to me about what they thought. I think there's no lack of intervention and conversation, but we did look at it as holistic as we are today. And what are we doing? I think we're doing a lot, but I would submit to anyone who wants to look at Washington County's budget or at its activities that we're siloed to some extent. It's not as smooth as I would like it to be. It's not as inclusive of saying, gee, do we need different departments doing different things? I mean, the whole housing issue, we have a housing authority, you know that. We have some interim housing activities that we do. It's handled by different people. We have health and behavioral issues that are handled by different folks. And then we have a great number of nonprofits that are doing the same thing. And so it's like a lot of people with good hearts and good intentions kind of stepping on each other from time to time, trying to figure out how to do this. And I admire them all. I mean, we all have big hearts. I admire them all, but it's not as smooth and as efficient as you would like it to be. It's much like a transportation issue. You asked me, people would say, well, who owns that road in front of me? And it depends. I mean, it could be a state, could be a county, could be a city, could be a private road. You have private roads. So we need to work that through, and I'm hoping that that'll happen.
Mm-hmm. Remember when counties used to be known for jails and roads, and that was about it? Times have really changed, haven't they?
They have. They have.
Speaking of the times, how would you assess Washington County's handling of the COVID crisis? You as the Board of Commissioners, you on the Board of Commissioners are the public health authority in Washington County. The public health system was really put to a test over the last couple of years, wasn't it?
It was. We had a lot of questions early on, about, and I asked some of them too, saying, well, how many people die of flu every year? How many cases of flu we have? And we knew it was more. We didn't know quite how to look at this particular issue. And we followed the science. We followed our folks who did this kind of work, and I'm glad we did. And so we've been pretty stringent on making certain that there's some sort of analysis before we put in any implemented, the mask mandates, the vaccine issues that we're going to have at the county. So I'm proud of what we did. I think we did a good job. It's morphing, this whole COVID-19, which probably is going to be COVID-20. I mean, who knows, 21, 22 someday. And we're going to have to figure out how we work with people, because that's what we do, in a way that doesn't fatigue them. And there are elements, small elements, who are very much against any vaccination, and we need to figure out how you work with people other than bludgeoning them into saying that you're going to do certain things. I'm a little different from maybe the board in that perspective. I'm fully vaccinated, and I'm going to get my booster as soon as I can. But there are people who, for religious reasons, medical reasons, can't get vaccinated. And I think we need to have some sort of testing program that, much like the airlines or much like a lot of other folks do, that we can accommodate people, not to jeopardize others and not to make them in an uncomfortable position. But if we're going to work remotely from home, and you're going to be at home, for instance, and that's not everybody, that's not a lot of our line folks, but if you are, can't we make some accommodations for that? Others would say no, they have to be vaccinated. That's it. And I believe in vaccination, as I said, but I think you need to figure out how you do that. I'm very much for not firing people and for terminating them simply because they have different views. I just don't want them to imperil me or my family. So I'm saying, well, I want you to take precautions. If you're going to be in your house, I don't get too concerned. If you're going to be tested on a regular basis, that's what you do. The mask mandate, we're getting in that debate now. It's been very effective. It's worked. It will continue to work. This isn't anything new in some parts of the world. They do it during flu season, but we're going to have to convince people that works. There's a lot of lore and a lot of myths out there about things. So that's just an education process.
That's for sure. Nonetheless, the vaccine rate in Washington County is very impressive. It's over 80%. I think that's something to be said for too. From your perspective, what's the recovery? What's the recovery in Washington County look like from COVID? Good, bad? Where are we going?
If you're talking purely about COVID, it's good. There's a lot of fiscal policies, and I like to talk about those because nobody else likes to talk about them. But the fiscal policies have not really helped the economy. So for small business, which a lot of people will look at our large businesses like the Intels and Nikes, who are wonderful partners, by the way. I have nothing but admiration for them. They're small employers in terms of great numbers. You would say, well, gee, they have 20-some thousand employees each, and well, Nike's a little less. Aren't they really driving the economy? Parts of it, but the people who are running the restaurants and the dry cleaners and the gasoline dispensers and and the retailers and little businesses like mine, we're really the bulk of the labor market, and they've not really fared well. There's great labor shortages, which is an interesting phenomenon. You have labor shortage, yet you have high numbers of people who want to be on unemployment. My solution to all of that, because I work on the work systems board, is that the best solution for poverty is to have a job, and let's find jobs for people, and let's do job training, and let's make it a little bit mandatory. And I know that sounds very harsh, but for those who are impaired in any way, we should be as generous as we can. For those who are not, maybe we have some tie-in to some job training, and we can do that. For childcare, which has been a huge issue, I proposed some congressional delegation folks as well as some state legislators a different approach than they're going. I understand it's a great issue. I'd like to give tax credits to businesses who provide that. And so they would provide that, and we'd get people back into employment versus people saying, "Give me the child care, and then I'll look for employment." I'm saying, let's put people back to work. I mean, that's the American way. And if we're going to look at it differently, that may be a different issue. But we've had wonderful success with the COVID vaccination, and yet our economy struggles. We also have to look and say, are we a tax not only county but state of preference? And probably not. The West Coast, we've been very generous in what we've believed and very compassionate in what we believe the services are, but those come at a cost. And I can tell you, I've talked with businesses, not recently, but last month, the month before, and the month before that, who are relocating out of this state and out of this area for tax reasons. We tend to forget about that and say, well, those are just that's an aberration. That doesn't happen. I'm telling you, it does. So we need to be mindful. How do we continue to attract good-paying family wage jobs that we all want, and how do we encourage businesses in some fashion to do that? And you're saying, well, what are you leading up to? Well, you have to be careful that we're compassionate, we're service-oriented, but we don't tax people to the point they don't want to be here. I mean, that's a problem. And so I can only give warnings. I can't give solutions, but I sense that's going to be a difficult recovery for us.
Warning heeded. Thank you. We have a few minutes left, and I have to ask you this. Not only are you a county commissioner, a former mayor, you served on just every regional and state board possible. You've also held down a full-time job as a CPA, an accountant, a municipal auditor. What is this inside of Roy Rogers that drives him to serve the public in the way that he does?
Well, I'll tell you a very corny joke that you'll get lots of letters about. Does that guy really believe that? And the answer is no. But I used to say, I during the day I figure out how not to have people pay taxes, and there's a variety of ways to do that. But at night I try to see how do we extract some to do the good that we need to do. So I've always believed that you're more than just your job. You're more than just somebody who thinks about themselves. You have to think about others. And so I think for me, and you're asking me personally, it's always been about public service. Whether it was when I first came into this area, I born and raised in Portland, and I came out to Washington County. I was always involved in nonprofit work and meaning volunteer. And so I got into politics because it was volunteer and never got any money at the city level or mayor level. And got a very small amount of money at the county level, and now it's, of course, full-time, much better paying. Other than me, I didn't take it, but I wanted to be a service. And so I'm hoping that we can go back to that tradition sometime with everyone, that they'll look that there's, as John F. Kennedy used to say, don't ask what your country can do for you, ask what you can do for your country. That resonated with me. And I think we all ought to ask what we can do. How can we volunteer? And so it sounds corny, but that's what it's about in my heart.
Oh, that sounds great. Last question. You're still a young man. Do you have any plans for higher office?
No, I wish I were young. I really don't plan on continuing at the county that, other than this term, but I would like to be involved at some capacity at, maybe a service district level or somewhere along that. I still have a lot yet, I think, to contribute and do. And I think that the county is going to, if I could say anything, it's not in your questions, at least I've heard, but I think it's going to have to redefine itself. If I could ask the county government to do anything, it would be to say, who do we want to be and what are we capable of doing? And I think it's going to be a very different model than what you see today. And so that's the big issues that are facing. And it's hard when you have, my board, you have one person who's been on there just less than a year. You have three others who are approaching, their third year, and then you have me. And am I any smarter than them? Absolutely not. Am I any more dedicated than them? Absolutely not. But I'm realistic to understand that we can't do everything. So let's pick what we can do well, and it's probably going to be that we're going to get out of some things that you now see us doing, and do some other things that you do see us doing. You're mentioning health and human service and housing. That's probably where the county's going to be headed to. But I think we need to have a thoughtful discussion about that. That's the future. It really is the future.
Yeah. Can we get you back on County Talk and talk about some of the other things that you're getting involved in, say 6 months from now?
Eric, whenever
Great.
you'd like me, it can be whenever. But thank you I want to say thank you for asking me. Anybody who wants to retread me, that's you're brave. You'll get 5 people watching your show.
You're a wealth of information. There's a lot of history there, and I think we really need to exploit it to some degree. So thank you, Commissioner Roy Rogers. We really appreciate you being with us today.
I appreciate your time. Thank you very much.
And that does it for this edition of County Talk. I'm Eric Schmidt. Thanks for watching. We'll see you again next time.